month is this? This is September, right?
September.
Yes. Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Comic Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of November. This is the kids' version. I love the kids' version. I love kids. I love kids reading comics. You love reading comics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I love that. I love that. We've got a really good book for you this month. I mean, we have a good book for you every month, but we've got a really good book for you this month. It's buzzing here, like that. And we are joined here in studio, as it was in the store, with Sam Sattin. Sattin or Sattin?
Sattin.
Okay,
yes, it's absolutely Sattin. Yeah.
Just making sure. And then on the remotes we got Rye Hickman. Hello, Rye.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm excellent. Great book. I just beautifully drawn, Rye.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I think it's fantastic. So I always kind of start with the same question because I really like this question, and it's why comics? Of all the things that you could be doing in your life, what is it about comics that lights you up, that engages you, that made this the medium that you wanted to do? Who do we want to start? Ryan, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
I've always loved telling stories, and I've always loved drawing. But comics specifically have the integration of both that make both parts the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Basically, the amount of information that you can pack onto a comic book page is so much more complex and unusual than you can do in just like a book or just a single illustration. Yeah, it's a tricksy, wonderful little medium.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Sam, I'm going to ask you the same question then.
Yeah, no, I think that Rye put it really well. It's just you can convey so much different kind of information on a comic book page than page of comics than you can with prose or with film. I think that some people think that comics and film are really related. I actually don't think they're as related in a lot of ways because it's not. It's about moving your eye across the page as opposed to and being able to see the whole page at once at the same time, which I think is just a really unique way of storytelling. And I think that also what I really love about comics in general is that Rye and I can work together and create a full visual story, which is that. First of all, the fact that it's collaborative, and second of all, the fact that just two people can create something, or one person can create something completely visual and that can be shown to the world. As opposed to like when you think about something like a film, for example, you have to have so many different people involved, and it's just any person can sit down and make a comic, which is something that I just love about the medium and the community in general.
Yeah. So let me ask you, as a writer in particular, it strikes me that it's much harder for a writer to break into comics, to build the relationships so that you can make comics, right? Because you can't make comics on your own.
No. Well,
do you draw at all?
I do draw, and I have made comics on my. I have made comics on my own, and so yeah, which I think is something that every comics writer should do. Every comics writer should also try to make comics. Try to draw comics so you can actually know what you're working on, and learn how to love the medium. But I don't know. I think it in some ways. I could see how it might be harder to break into comics as a writer, but I think it's also, I know it's been quite difficult for quite a few artists that I know as well to break into the medium. I think it's about embracing, in my opinion, visual writing. Like you have to learn how to write visually. which is it's a different thing than prose. I started out in prose, and without being too long-winded, I write prose as well. I write nonfiction and fiction, and it's such a different idea to write comics, and you really have to embrace visual language, which again means learning how to draw, and then also learning how to collaborate. So though I'm a writer, I work with Rye, my co-creator, together to create this story. We created it together. And so one of the big things that I think writers have an issue with when they come into comics in general is they think, okay, I'm running the show. You know, I'm the person who's going to be setting out this entire script, and I just want I don't want to really collaborate. I just want to dictate.
Sure.
You know, and that to me is a mistake, and it makes it hard for people to break into the medium, as opposed to if you come in and say, hey, look, we're all in this together, you know, all for all, one for all, you know. I think for me that has made that's facilitated my ability to work in the medium, because I think that if you don't do that, you kind of end up, you know, having a really hard time getting your ideas across.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, when you look at sort of, let's call them assembly line comics, the Marvel and DC style.
Yeah.
I understand why writers write that way, because you have 28 days, every script, you can't necessarily tailor it to people. And when we look at good examples of people who have tailored scripts, say Neil Gaiman on Sandman is probably my go-to example. He was not producing scripts monthly, you know, because you can't when you're doing it that way.
No.
You know, if you have to sort of reconceptualize how you do each issue for the individual artist, it's much more work that way ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, and I think it's like, you know, and then also it just kind of takes away from this again. I feel like the spirit of comics is mostly collaborative.
Yeah.
Just in general, it's a very community oriented medium and community. So that's why I think that for me it's important to not kind of like isolate yourself and think I am the singular genius behind this idea. Sure. I don't know. Yeah, I wonder what Rye would think about that.
But I would love to hear what Rye has to say about that. Rye, do you have a comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Sam is saying, that one of the coolest things about comics is that it can be very, very collaborative. And it does get tricky in some more meta ways to figure out, like, well, who did this X, Y, and Z thing? Was it the writer or was it the artist? You know, like, who made what decision and at what point? And typically it's like a conversation. And so it's hard to say, oh, well, here's the clean divide between like this part of the book and this part of the book. And that is awesome in my book. And yeah, I think I've worked in the assembly line style production process as well. And it's more of a trust fall with your collaborators, right? You really, really hope that they're going to pick up what you're putting down, and that they're going to be okay with any choices or changes that you're making. And that can be very, very stressful. Whereas, you know, in a OGN like the one that me and Sam made, it's we have much more of a back and forth, much more check-ins, much more, does this work for you? What do you think about this X, Y, and Z thing? Which is way less stressful.
Yeah, so maybe let's talk a little bit about, let's start with the conception of the project.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, where did buzzing come from? But clearly buzzing came from your experiences when you were young, yeah?
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. It was a suggestion from an editor to kind of like put a couple like different ideas together. And so the idea of putting together, so one of the things that I've struggled with throughout my life is obsessive compulsive disorder, which is something that I was kind of uniquely, because I don't think it was diagnosed as often in when I was growing up, but I was uniquely kind of diagnosed with it when I was younger, and I still kind of work with it, and I have to understand it, but it's one of those things that I've, you know, had to kind of negotiate and maneuver over a long period of time. And and then kind of crossing that with the idea of role-playing games, which is also a big part of playing, Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPGs growing up. And then, Ryan and I started talking about this idea, and we started we wanted it to be about that, but then we also wanted it to be a story. More than that, we wanted it to be a story about friendship and growth,
Sure.
and kind of like and kind of put each of us into the story in a way that's meaningful from a character perspective and from a narrative perspective. So yeah, so in some ways it did start out with that idea of trying to figure out how role-playing games in general and friendship can actually help not subdue but help understand essentially mental health.
Yeah.
And then while at the same time trying to figure out how to make it a story just about some kids being kids.
Yeah. So did you, in terms of the process of making it, did you pitch the broad idea to an editor originally before you started breaking the story, as it were?
Yeah, we pitched the broad idea to an editor, and then Ryan and I got to kind of working on a pitch once that idea was kind of put through. And said, oh, I like that idea. And so then we started to, work together to really flesh it out. And we went through a lot of different, we approached it from a lot of different angles and tried to figure out what the best one was, and worked with the editor to tailor the pitch for, to make sure that it would work for Little Brown's. And it ended up making its way through. Yeah, so that's that's the way that Ryan, does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it went.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm trying to think. But yeah, basically we basically decided we wanted to make a story that was, yes, it was based in that sort of material, sort of that stuff, but then it kind of evolved to something that was more holistic in a lot of ways.
So both of you towards the top of this were talking about how comics are the page would be the short way to say it, I think. In terms of putting together your first scripts, your pitch, how are you thinking about the page at that point? Or are you? Like, when's the point where you start actually thinking about the page? Let's try it that way.
That's a great point. Right, you want to take that one first?
I mean, I feel like the first iteration that I saw of Buzzing was a synopsis. And then I did see some script pages. And so from my perspective, I do tend to, see the story in very broad strokes first, but then move almost immediately, once Sam has written script pages, to looking at that and thinking about the page itself, right? So the magic that moves from synopsis to me seeing script pages is all Sam. And then one of the things that I think that we tried in Buzzing that I wasn't sure would work very well, but that I ended up absolutely loving, was Sam wrote scene changes where there's always a panel sort of moving us from one scene into the next, sometimes an establishing shot and sometimes not. And at first I was like, oh, I'm not sure, will this slow the story down too much? Is this unnecessary? But now that I look at the book as a whole, I really, really like that choice. And when I was looking at it on a page level, it was, someone else making that call and me deciding, let's try it. Let's see if it works. I think for most of my, aside from me and Sam talking through themes and B plots and which characters will do what and that sort of thing, I do tend to look at the comic as the page. That's just the nature of the job,
So you're talking, I want to say specifically about sort of the first panel of each new scene is an establishing shot.
Well, yeah, something to set the scene rather than every single scene diving into the middle. Yeah, no, I mean, I hadn't actually noticed it on my read, but now that you say it,
when I flip through the book, it's like, oh, yes, that is definitely there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my manga obsession.
Mhm.
That's kind of like my
Yeah.
like because I read a lot of manga and I'm really into it, and what manga does so well, what I like, and I know it differs. As I'm so this is the first time that I heard about this. It's absolutely fascinating. Like because one of the things that I really like about manga is that it really does really great at establishing shots and really slow down every single new scene where you're in a new place. They're like, you're in a new place. Let's take a second to be in a new place. And American comics sometimes do that, sometimes don't. It kind of goes, I think it goes back and forth, right? It depends. And like, so yeah, that's fascinating. That's because I definitely do that. I don't think I would conscious of it. Like,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so then, okay, when you're writing a script and you're thinking about the page as a unit, are you doing your own thumbnails?
No, I don't do
Okay.
thumbnails. I'm weird.
I meant for yourself, like not something that you were going to give
No,
to Rye or another artist.
No. The way that I do it is I actually I don't even know if Rye knows this, but the way that I do it usually is I go through the whole entire thing and I do dialogue.
Okay.
And without any, I just do I do beats.
Okay.
So each panel is a beat. I kind of look at it like that, like a pacing, as a pacing challenge. And so I'll have like, okay, this is the beat of the page, and here's how the dialogue is going to fit into the beats of the page. And then I go back and try to figure out how that all works visually.
Sure.
And so it's kind of I almost like work backwards in a way. So it's kind of just, and then I'll go jump around through scenes and I'll try to do it that way. But that's the way that I mostly do it.
And when you're writing these beats, are you like 6 to 8 per scene, more or less? Yeah.
And also one of the things that I think about is like I know that when I'm working with Rye, for example, Rye will be like, yeah, that works, or yeah, that's not going to work. And then like so condensing panels or putting or expanding things out or taking or being like, oh, this is not worthwhile. We don't need this here.
Well, kind of to get to the thing you said earlier, I mean, in a lot of ways, the script in an ideal world should be a suggestion rather than a thing that you must do it this way.
That's
because the artist, who's the visual person there, first off, is living with it a whole lot longer than you are as a writer.
Well, but that said, like, and I won't speak for Rye. I would love Rye to speak for themselves, but like essentially, like Rye, you like a little bit more direct scripting, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's more what I'm used to, but like I definitely have no problems with making changes or completely scrapping whatever's in the script if something else works better. I don't think I had to do that very many times in this book. And I try to always communicate about that because it seems rude to just change stuff without having a conversation about it. But yeah, I do like a direct script. I don't know.
Yeah, but right. I would agree that I think it's basically like it's a living thing, right? So we go back and forth on it and make sure that it's like I mean, it's interesting because working with this is nothing against any big publishers, but like a lot of it, working with the big publishers in comics, it's interesting because sometimes they want this thing. This might be too inside baseball kind of stuff, but it's like sometimes they want to do version control in their manuscripts. So they want to have an early manuscript that has they want to have an early manuscript that basically they can pop into a version control for their records at the publisher, like they do with a prose book. So like somebody will write they'll write when you write a prose book, they want the manuscript official version in so they can go ahead and edit it, and they want another version and they want another version. But it's hard to explain that actually everything is probably going to change until the letters are put on the page. Right. And even then it's going to change. So it's like, it's like, because you have to see after you write a script, and then, so after I write the script and Rye and I go back and forth in the script, then Rye goes and draws the script. And then we have to see if it actually all lines up, because a lot of things have to change. A lot of things have to oh, here there's way too much dialogue, or here there's we have to move around this whole entire section because it's not going to work the way that we thought it was going to work. And so essentially what they were doing was doing work that doesn't end up being used at all.
Right.
At the publisher, they were doing stuff that was like they were just doing stuff they would have a full and we would try to explain like you're not gonna this is useless. It's not gonna help. It's just you're doing extra work for nothing. And they're like, no, we need to do it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay. And
but
then
because they're used, but that's because they're used to prose,
They're used
and
to
they're
prose.
used to thinking about it at prose, and prose
That's
doesn't
right.
fundamentally change usually.
No, not like
Yeah.
that. And it's like
Yeah.
but with comics, it really is a living thing up until the last, until it gets lettered, and then there's a pass in the lettering, and then it's getting closer to what it is going to look like. But I think it's really interesting to see how that process works out when you're collaborating, as opposed to, or probably even when you're just doing it as one person, I would assume. But it's like but especially with collaboration, like you go to you have to figure out that really it's a unique that way, that it's not like any other medium that I've seen, that you just you really have to wait till the end to see what it's really going to look like.
Yeah. So I'm curious a little bit about just in terms of the script process where you're trying to figure out your page, because it strikes me that one of the things about comics is that comics is the art of reduction, right? It's stripping out all the extraneous stuff and finding one thing that juxtaposes against another thing. That can be panels or it can be ideas, right? And I'm right about this.
That's
right.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah,
so do you think about that consciously as you're writing, or yes? Okay.
Now I do more than I did in the past, and Rye can actually probably see the difference because we worked on another book together, Best Camp, before this one. But it's like I've gotten better over time with economy. Because I think that the idea that one of the things about writing comics is that you have to be comfortable that most of what you put on the page is going to be invisible to the reader. So you're going to be writing a script, and you're going to be writing all these words. It's going to be 120-page script, just in like a Word doc, whatever it happens to be, and maybe 5 to 10% of it will make its way onto the actual comics page. And you have to be really comfortable with that, and that's kind of part of the magic behind it. There's this great book that I've been reading recently called Invisible Ink by Brian McDonald. He actually talks about comics in this as well, but it's all about the idea of what you don't see on the page. So I think that maybe that's for me, that's about economy too. You have to be okay, you have to everybody's got an ego, but you have to they have to be okay, I don't need to have everything on the page. I need to actually, because the thing about, I think you probably agree, Rye, and I'm sure you might agree, Brian, but basically the idea that the point of a good comic, when you read a comic fast and you go through it really, really fast, that means it's good. If you have a hard time reading a comic and it's going slow and it's really taking, it's kind of grabbing, returning your anchor back to a certain panel, and you're like, wait, what's going on? Or what's this person saying? Or there's so much dialogue on the page. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but at the same time, it's usually the standard for a good comic is that you can just, it's so exciting and well done that you're tearing through it. And then you can go back later if you want to and really appreciate the panels and the art and stuff. But it's one of the things that's almost a little tragic about comics, but it's also one of those things that is you could take 10 years to work on something and read it in 2 hours. But it's
that's really true. But one of the things I love about comics is how the audience is not, the reader is not a slave to what the author has done. In other words, if you watch a television show or you watch a film, it goes forward at 24 frames per second or whatever it is, and you have no control over that as an audience member. But in a comic, I find it's really common, even when I am going through a book really fast and reading it, I'm really into it. It's not uncommon at all for me to go, wait a minute, let me go back 6 pages and look at this again. based on the new information that I've gotten 6 pages later.
Yes,
Oh, I'm going to reread. You don't do that in movies,
No.
you know. You do it at the end. I've done it with a couple of movies. You know, when I saw Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean. The second it was over, we're watching this again right now.
Sure.
You know,
or you can go back 10 or 20 seconds, but it's
Right.
like it's a different kind of thing.
It's
you can
a
go
different
back
kind
and
of
just be
thing.
like,
Yeah.
wait, what happened?
Exactly.
Yeah, just like, you know,
exactly.
yeah, and I think that's absolutely true, and I think that speaks to the. But I think the idea of even doing that, like the fact that you can go back and you can go look, it just speaks to the idea that a good comic, a good graphic novel, in my view, is to carry the eye in a very fluid way.
Oh, absolutely.
Across the page.
Yeah.
So you're not like, so you're sitting here. So when so the idea of economy for me ties into the idea of like trying to hold back, you know, to make sure that you're not overpowering or stagnating the story. You know, and like I don't know, Ryan, what do you think about that? Curious.
To go back to the movies versus comics thing real fast, I've heard that described as stories that are passively consumed, like a film where you just sit there and as long as your eyes are open, you don't really have a choice in whether or not you are, taking in what is in front of you, versus a book or a comic book, which is more active consumption, where you have to choose not only to move forward, but how fast you move forward. And yeah, that's to me the big like distinction between those two types of media. And I really like comics for the fact that readers can pore over a little panel for 10-20 minutes if they want to, and still have a great time with the story.
Yeah, because the reader controls time in a comic.
Exactly.
It's neat. It's the only medium that happens, I think.
The only one.
So Ryan, when you get your script from him, what's your first step when you have that script? Are you going straight to thumbs? Are you sort of going through the whole script and making notes, or like how's your process work?
Yeah, so I go through the script first as a reader, right? And when I go through the very first time as a reader, even though I'm already familiar with the story and have already like talked through various aspects of it with Sam, I always go through and figure out, like, I pay attention to what my reactions are to different parts. Where did I get confused? Where did I have a big emotional reaction? Where did I laugh? Where, like, what strings got pulled in me as a reader? And I will typically take notes in the script for like when that happened. I'm like, ooh, this moment rocks. Like this moment really like lit something in me, and that is awesome, and I need to pay attention to that in the future. Or this moment is a little confusing, so when I get to thumbnailing, like let's really be careful and make sure that we can be as clear as we need to. And after I do my first pass, I move into thumbnails. And my thumbnails these days I'm using them as pencils a lot of the time. I've gotten really, really just like quick and comprehensive with them. So that's awesome because I can then share them back to Sam and be like, hey, what do you think? Instead of having to do any interim stages to make sure they're legible.
Are you pen and ink or are you digital?
These days, digital. Every now and then, if I want to, especially for thumbnails, I will do those traditionally with a pencil and paper. But these days, I'm digital primarily because otherwise the stacks of Bristol would just take over my life.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Your inks are really, I mean, just your traditional inks are really like, you pretty much like started, that was your basis for what you really love doing, right? It was like really nice traditional inks at first, right?
Oh yeah. And I feel like I figured out how to make my digital inks almost as lovely as my traditional inks. There's certain things with texture you just can't replicate, or I haven't figured out how to yet. But yeah, by and large, these days all digital.
Yeah, and you wrote the whole script all the way through. I'm assuming you gave Rye.
Did we batch
here's
it?
200 pages of stuff, or
did we batch
it? No, you handed it to me all at once. Yeah.
I did. Okay,
yeah.
Good. Yeah. Then that's weird.
Yes.
I wrote the full script, and it's I think I thought I batched it because I think I wrote the middle first, and then some of the end. The big, I don't know. I went back and I jumped back and forth. Yeah. So it's like, but yeah, we did. I handed the full one to you, and then I think you went over it and told me what worked and what didn't, and then we sent it to the editor, right?
Yeah, something like that. That sounds right.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
so and then Rye, you have all 200 pages of the script.
Mhm.
Are you doing all 200 pages of thumbnails, or are you
Yes.
doing a chunk? Oh, okay. So you're doing
Yeah.
the whole thing thumbnailed first.
Yeah, it sort of surprised me the first time that I did it this way, but I really like laying out the entire book at one go, just because then I can have a very high level look at it and make sure that all the moving pieces are actually moving, that my compositions aren't getting too repetitive, that characters are sort of moving and gesticulating and all of this like the same way consistently throughout the book. And then after that, I do batch between pencils and inks in like 50-page increments. Because one time I did try to do all the pencils in one go, and I was losing my mind a little bit. It's just too much of the same thing. But thumbnailing is so much mental heavy lifting that it actually works way better just to do it all at once.
Yeah, I talked to Klaus the last time we had him, and this was like 7 years ago when he did Patience, and that's like a 400-page book. And he told me that he did every step distinctly all the way through page 1 to page 400. And I'm like, how does that not drive you insane? How are you still enthusiastic 300 pages in to ink? I mean, I don't get it, but everybody has a different process, which is one of the things I love about comics too. Let's pause this here just for a second while I kind of turn to you in the studio audience and put you on the spot to go. Do you have any questions about how this was made, or their thinking, or
how did you come up with the characters?
The characters, that's a really good question. So I wanted to make sure, well, there's a couple different answers to this. One is that I wanted I think that both Ryan and I wanted both myself and themselves in the book in terms of like what our characters kind of represented and could be in the book. So we kind of, that's why when I say this book was kind of based in some ways off of me as a kid, in some ways it's completely, these characters are their own characters. And so, I was kind of thinking about, Isaac kind of being a little bit like me growing up, but at the same time, I grew up, both my parents were at home, and in the book, Isaac is being raised by a single mom, which is a little bit different. And then Micah comes from a more kind of like progressive and kind of open family, and is also gender fluid, and kind of is genderqueer, and definitely has more of a perspective on I feel like on life than Isaac has at that point. So what I kind of did is I dictated I kind of put together some ideas for these characters, and including the friends, because I had a group of friends like that growing up too. And then from what I remember, Rye, you kind of took those ideas and you kind of ran with them, right?
Yeah, I do remember that coming up with the physical designs for the characters was really straightforward. I didn't have to do much back and forth because the mind melding had happened already, I think.
Mind melding, we kind of knew what we wanted. Yeah, we mind meld, and then we kind of we came up with the idea of the characters, right?
And visually, this is true for any book that I work on, but I try to keep characters' silhouettes a little bit different from each other, so that at a quick glance you know who is who. Even if they were at some point actually silhouetted, which I don't think I did in this book. So that's something I always try to juggle, just make sure there's a variety and a recognizable variety.
Yeah. One also and the characters of the and this is probably this might tie into another question, but the idea of the bees are a character as well.
Yeah.
So that was
I want to handle that one as its own question, actually.
Yeah.
Does
that answer?
Wait, let me stick with one little thought on this though. Is the role playing game that's within it, each character in the book has their own character as well, and
Yeah.
so I'm thinking that's probably more you, Rye, as a visual thing.
Well,
like,
I mean, yes, but Sam absolutely did come up with Gruntus having a club that says "mommy" on it, and I think I laughed for a solid 10 minutes at that one. So Sam gets the credit / blame for that. But yeah, similar to the kids in their day-to-day lives, I had to make sure the fantasy characters all had their own silhouettes. And then I thought a lot about how, like, when I was in middle school, me and my friends would have our own little like OCs that we would make and that we would draw and that we would, get very, very into, and how they were half an idealized forms of ourselves and half just like absolutely random crap that we just wanted to play with absolutely like no filter in between which was which, and no self-awareness either. So I tried to bring a little bit of that into the book as well.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then we will go back to that follow up. But did that answer your question? That you want? Okay, all right. Did you have another one? No, you don't have to. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I mean, I was going to ask how you decided to write about a character with OCD, but then that was answered earlier on.
Well, yeah, no, I did talk about that, but I can also say that, one of the things that it was, I will say that it was something I didn't know that I was going to write about, because like for the most part I write like, sci-fi, fantasy kind of like stuff. That's what I do. And so this is the only story that I've worked on that's been more. It's just a realistic story. It takes place in this world. So it's been. I will say that it's like I wanted to see if it could possibly help someone out.
Was it maybe sort of for yourself, therapeutic in some ways? I mean, I love that. I mean, I grew up with comics, but we're looking at like Tintin and Mad Magazine, which actually was my introduction to Star Wars. I remember that.
Yeah.
I learned about it through Mad Magazine. But I think it's great nowadays that comics expand into graphic novels too, and into subjects that in the past weren't discussed. But like, this is all great stuff, and then the comic becomes more than just a narrative or a story or entertaining. It's a learning. It's a book to learn. You can pick it up again. It's something we learn about human issues, and I think it's great. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's like that was the hope that kind of with a book like this is that I know that we wanted it to be a story first, and then second we were hoping that the idea would be that somebody could read it and see themselves in it. And actually, I'm not sure if I told you this, but I just got this, but like I just got I got a letter from someone who read it and felt that it really helped them understand, because they had recently been diagnosed with OCD, and they didn't really know what was going on in their mind. They were younger, they were in high school, and they said it really the B visualization really helped them understand, like like it's exactly how it is, like that's what it's like, and like and I was like, oh, what?
It's kind of like when there's like that one fly that's like kind of buzzing around here and it's annoying you.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so it's like and I was like, oh, it's so good to hear that somebody else, right? It's so good that somebody. Actually, it was funny because my fiance's niece was like, well, why didn't you make it about like with flies? Because flies are so much more annoying. And I'm like, well, I don't think it would have been as friendly if there was a bunch of flies. It would have been a little bit more of a grimmer take on that. But I mean, even so, bees are a little friendlier. And you talking about before how I was talking about Ryan and I were talking about a different talk about how a different event that the bees, one of the reasons why is because people are afraid of bees because they're going to sting you, or they're afraid. But then when you see bees want nothing to really, they aren't dangerous. They just they have stingers, and they can kind of get close to you, but they're really not harmful. And so but they are there, and you have to kind of learn to live with them. But like, kind of idea. But yeah, no, that's so. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but at the same time, like it's true that that the book definitely was trying to say like, hey, can anybody else see this? Does this feel like does this feel right? Does this feel like it's a good visualization of what it's like? And if so, like, does it help you?
Yeah.
Does it help you kind of like understand how you can, visualize your OCD like annoying bees?
Yeah. Well, and I think it helps for people who don't have that challenge, because as a reader, I don't have any challenges at all. But seeing this visualized in this way made it a lot clearer to me what you and other people are going through.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most powerful things about comics is being able to put you in somebody else's shoes, and see another culture or another way of thinking or another way of viewing the world that you would never, ever, ever have come up with on, like, I've read about OCD, and to me, like, the way that pop culture usually does it, it's always knock 3 times or that kind of stuff. It's all like physical repetition is all that it is.
They don't talk about which intrusive imagery.
Yeah.
Which is a big part of it. And so that's like, most of the time that I've heard about OCD, people are like, oh my God, I'm so OCD. And just like, I have to keep my schedule, everything, my room is always so clean, or like I have to like make sure everything's in its place. And I'm like, that's not it. Like, it's like, I know why people say it, but it's like, if it really is about like, it can be very debilitating, very debilitating for people who have it if they don't deal with it if they don't approach it in a certain way or get perspective. So it's like, I hope that's something too, that for people, it's the book is for everybody for a lot of reasons, but I think that's one of the things, like, if it can teach you a little bit, like, oh wow, is that really a part of it? And like, because I really feel like it's one of those things that's very, OCD is something that's very misunderstood.
Sure.
Very misunderstood.
Sure.
Yeah. And like, and not in a way that makes me upset, but more just like in a way that I would say, like, it's good to know that it's not just about like, knocking 3 times or keeping your house in order or something like that. It's actually about intrusive thoughts and intrusive ideas, images.
Yeah. And so let's go then to the bees conversation of how did you conceptualize that as your visual motif for the book?
So this is something that Ryan and I actually worked on together for sure. And this is like essentially I had read a book called Lighter Than My Shadow at one point, in which it's about I think she's a teenager with an eating disorder. And I think it's a British book, actually. I'm not quite sure, but it's basically, it's the visualization of her anxiety and the disorder is done with a lot of little squiggles, a lot of little lines that kind of make their way into frames. And when she's feeling overpowered by these anxieties, they really eat into the frame. And it's kind of it's a tough book. It's not an easy book to get through. But it's a good book. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh, that's a really great way visually to depict what essentially mental illness can look like.
Sure.
From time to time, where it's like you're just walking around and something is eating its way into your life without you wanting it to at all. And then so Ryan and I talked about like the way to represent it would be this bee metaphor, and we had to figure out like how the biggest balance and the biggest thing about it was how to make it apparent that the bees are pretty much on most pages of the book. They're almost always there, save for a couple sections. And it was how to make sure that they were there and how they would make sure that they were, because I would love to hear what Ryan thinks of this. Like, it's like, the idea of having something like having dealing with mental health in any kind of way is that it doesn't really go away. It doesn't stop. You don't just like, I think you'll notice the book doesn't say like, oh well,
Do this and it's solved.
do this and it's solved.
Yeah.
It's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But you can learn that the more you go on through your life, the more it does kind of just become something in the background, and you can realize what it is, and you can live with it. And it's not scary. It's just there. It's part of you, and they can also help with certain things, and they can kind of almost give you certain, superpowers in certain ways. But it's like, but yeah, so that's a part of that I think we both wanted to convey, was how to make it visually to a reader look like what somebody might be feeling on the inside, which is essentially they're always there, but at the same time they're also kind of they're always there to the point where they become forgotten.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Rye, I wanted to ask you about the decision for the bees to be so much more cartoony than the rest of the book, right? Because that had to have been a conscious decision, yeah.
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. I was thinking a lot about how in comics specifically, but I'm sure in other media, when things are more cartoonish or cute or, just simplified, we as a reader have a much easier time engaging with difficult subject matter. I think the biggest example is definitely Mouse. Right? Like there's a lot of really heavy things that readers can relate to far easier because it's with cute little mice and the cats and all of that, where they might not relate as well if it was a photorealistic human. And because Isaac's bees are, often telling him absolutely horrible things. Sorry, my cat's insistent. Come on.
It's all right.
She wants attention. But because Isaac's bees are often like telling him awful things, feeding him like, upsetting imagery, I figured that the more simplified and cartoonish they were, the more that would be able to work for the reader and really land for the reader, and the reader would let themselves be open to it in ways that they might not be so open if it were a photorealistic bee. Okay, she's getting attention.
Please be dressed as a bee right now.
And then on a very practical level, this is pragmatic and definitely not the most important reason to do anything. I drew a lot of bees, and it's a lot easier to draw a simple bee than it is to draw a complex bee.
Yeah. I mean, on a certain level, they don't even really look like bees, other than the yellow,
like cartoony bees,
right?
Yeah, they're levitating dumplings, basically.
Yeah. No, I thought that the imagery of the metaphor was very strong, and it worked very well with what you were doing. Because this is a kid's book, or at least a young adult book. I don't know. Was there a remit from your publisher to be one or the other? I mean,
no. What would you say?
Not for that thing, no.
Okay.
Well, and it also, I just handed over some pitch pages with the bees as they are in the book. So that wasn't even really a conversation, because everyone else just agreed that this was the take on the bees that we should go with.
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about with the bees in particular.
Yeah. But also the script in general, because you're dealing with some big and heavy issues here.
Yeah.
And how do you find the right path to explain what a thing is, but not necessarily dumb it down, but to keep its sharpness? If you see what I'm saying here, because if you're talking specifically to a children's audience, I would think that there is a pressure to keep it really simple and stupid,
Yeah, well, I think it's always. I mean, I would love to, again, hear what you think about this, right? But like, I think it's always a conversation with the publisher, and my whole entire thing is like, I don't know how this would go over, but it's like, essentially, I'm always just like, we're going to do what we want to do, and we'll see we'll see what happens. So it's like, so it's like kind of like, yes, the book is being published as middle grade, which means between 8 and 12 years old. I personally think that it can be read between 8 and I think it's a very all ages category. I think a lot of this is about, to be perfectly frank, about trying to sell books, and put them on the shelf, where a place where people will try to pick them up. So do I think that buzzing is strictly for a middle grade audience? Absolutely not. I think it's for a lot of different age groups that would like to read it. I do think there are certain things that we try to keep a little that won't be probably, for example, if there's some rules, I think, that around drinking, around nudity, things like that you have to keep in mind for a certain age group.
Yeah, but you also your characters are young enough; those are not going to come up as topics.
That's right.
I would imagine.
No.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so like it's more about, so yeah, I mean, like, but we wanted to make sure that the intrusive thoughts and things were in fact represented accurately, and there are a lot of ideas around death and around
well, and that's what
imagery.
It's kind of what I was trying to get at, is that there's a lot of you're stupid, you're worthless, and
abuse.
Right, and it is. And was there a concern for you as an author, and for both of you as authors, I mean Rye as well, that you would be crossing the line into triggering someone? If you see what I'm saying,
yeah,
right?
No, it's a great point. I mean, like, I think that this is one of the conversations that I think this is a big conversation people are having right now about art in general, and like seeing like where does the crossover happen. I remember at first they wanted us to put a bully in there.
Yeah, I remember that.
They wanted us to have a bully, and we decided that we're not going to have a bully because
It's overused.
It's overused. We were like, why would this bully need to be? We had to create somebody who's just mean because they're mean, and also the bees are bully enough.
Yeah.
So it's like the bees are nasty enough that we don't need a bully, and it was just this kind of conversation about kids. I don't think you need to talk down to kids.
No, you don't.
I think the kids. I mean, at least type of kid I went through a lot of stuff, and and I think it's okay to not trigger, but I think it's okay to go through aspects of things that kids deal with.
I mean, to that point specifically, I think fiction is a fantastic space for any reader who is dealing with subject matter that could trigger them in a safe and self-care sort of way. Because when you pick up this book, it's about OCD, that it's, well, if you have OCD, you probably have, you hope that you have a good idea of what might be in there. And so if you get activated by something that we put in the book, you can close the book and walk away and have a conversation about it, right? Like, you're the one in control in that situation. It's not like you're mid-fight with a parent or something and just have to keep going even though you're absolutely triggered. It is a very safe way for readers to engage with more difficult stuff.
Very well
and
played.
I think if all kids' books are just silly and dumb, we lose that space for people to sort of, explore these things safely.
Very true. Completely right.
Was at an editorial level, did your editor or publisher, because those are different things in many cases, give you notes on what they wanted, or did they just leave you to it as they saw that you guys had it under control?
Want to take this one?
Sure. So by and large, editorial loved what we were doing. I did have a phone conversation with our editor about a possible sort of queer bullying, queer drama, queer trauma B plot with Micah. And our editor was very adamant that we should not put that on the page, that this is not the space for it, that is not what the book is about. And I was for a little while ready to die on that hill and ready to really push for it. But now that I look at the book that we created, I really like the sort of the singular lens, the focus that we brought to it. Sorry, my cat's back again. And I am glad now that we didn't include a big stressful B plot, because I think it lets the rest of the story elements that we were working with really like sing and have room to breathe and room to get a little more nuanced and deep. I'm not sure if I agree with the overall sentiment that like it's a bad idea to have that sort of conflict and story on the page with regards to, you know, queer kids in bad family situations, which is what we were thinking of going with. Like from a very pulled out perspective, like that should not be a problem. But I do agree that for this book, it was fine to have it completely without.
Yeah, your cat agrees as well. I think this is why.
Oh yeah, yeah. She this is the real editor here.
Yes. No, I actually I completely agree with Bryce. I think it's like, you know, and if we get it, I don't know, we, knock on wood, we get a chance to do a sequel for this in the future or something like that, I would like to explore that a lot more, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do agree. I think there's, the editors did really love what we were doing for the most part, but there was that pushback. And I do think that that there is a concentrated. This is not just about our editors. This is about just in general across the,
Of course.
The medium, that like in editors in general, they're like, well, what if we deviate too much from what a kid's intention is capable of consuming? So, for example, at one point, I think it was suggested that the whole entire book take place in school, and we were like, no.
That was
I
think that was me specifically refusing to draw that many classrooms.
No, I'm not going to classroom for 200 pages, And like I was like, yeah, and you shouldn't. And also, we were kind of in this philosophically, we kind of like, and I know you understand, Miss Cat, but like it's like we were, philosophically, like, we were like, well, kids don't just spend every moment of their life in school.
Though it feels like it.
It can feel like it sometimes. People they go to friends' houses.
Sure.
They go on little trips. I mean, kids do things that aren't only in school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we, at least that's how it was for me. It's how I remember it. So it's like, anyway, that was a big part of it. But yeah.
It fits to me too. I mean, I hope that there will be a sequel to it on the next one. There is definitely room for that layer of saying what OCD and gender identity, if they come together, that complexity. But I think I would agree on the first book, that's already a strong topic that maybe you want to focus on. And I'm glad it's not just in the school.
Yes.
It really doesn't make sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you.
And so this editorial input was coming after you had written the script, though? Yeah?
It was actually in the synopsis.
I see.
We were going to get to the full synopsis. Yeah. And we were saying that, we wanted to switch between different scenes. And like, so for example, there's a scene where they go camping with their families. And there's a scene where they go over to their friends' houses. There's a scene where they're in school. There's a scene where they go to a bookstore, which are things that kids do, so it's like, and so they're like,
kids don't come into bookstores.
And so it's like, so we're like, okay, like it makes sense to us. So it's like, but they were just like, and then we got this kind of little bit of like, well, kids spend most of their time in school, so they should be in school the whole time. And we're like, well, that's, it's also just kind of like a one note story. And then, and again, there was all these ideas about, and I get it. It's like the idea of like, well, you want to concentrate on the kid's life and the kid's POV because it's like a book for kids. But at the same time, also we wanted to put other people in there as well that could, impacted our main character's life. And so, it was that idea of kind of trying to figure out how to do that and being, just putting our foot down when we needed to and just being like, nope, not doing that, doing this instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems like, in a book like this, there's a number of challenges in terms of working with the intentions of what you want the story to be, working with the expectation that a publisher has for how they want to put a book position a book into the marketplace,
Uh-huh.
and then the audience as well, is what the audience is going to take from it,
Yes.
and how you balance those three things seems to be really challenging for a book like this to me.
Yeah, I think we did an awesome job. Though.
Yeah,
Just like,
yeah, no,
I mean-
100%.
No, but I think we were. But you're right. I think it definitely was a big balancing act
Mhm.
and a high wire act to make sure that everybody got enough of what they wanted to be able to make it work. And that essentially that Ryan and I made the book that we wanted to make.
And so when you guys were doing the initial sort of breaking the story portion of it, were these topics that you guys discussed amongst yourself?
Yeah, I feel like we did, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely talked about this stuff. We talked about all these different
Okay.
aspects.
Oh,
Yeah, like making sure that we were very much like we want to make the book we want to make. So let's try to, we also knew that we were dealing with we're being published by a publisher and they have their wants as well. But so we just needed to make sure that we, picked our battles and that we. But I think we won most of them.
Yeah.
So it ended up being coming out. I mean, I love the book that we made.
Yeah.
So
I do too. I think it really worked out well. I wanna talk about the art a little more in depth, and so we're gonna sideline you just a little bit here, Sam.
Yeah.
I mean, just to throw out questions too. But so, Rye, your process. You said that you thumbnailed the entire thing through, and that your thumbnails essentially work for you as pencils. Is that
yes, some panels, yeah.
yeah? So I guess that's what my question is. Like, are your thumbnails in this case essentially a sketch version, or are you doing sort of traditional little micro thumbnails just to get sort of how gesture works on the page? I don't know if I asked that question correctly. Not being an artist.
I'll just describe what it looks like. It's like first thing I do obviously is figure out like the layout, where the panels are going to go, how they're going to lead the eye, how they're going to impact the reader's sense of time. The biggest panel on the page tends to be what readers will think is the most important. So like, what does that look like? All of that sort of thing. And then I go in, and in each panel, I will sketch out the composition. And I will also sketch out where the dialogue should go, so that I hopefully leave enough space for the letterer to, do their job and not come kill me in my sleep. And from there, especially if it's a panel where it is just a character emoting or just a couple of characters talking back and forth, my sketches tend to be what I would do in my pencils anyway. So I can just take those to inks and get the freshness and the fluidity of thinking with ink instead of tracing in some way.
No, it's interesting. How much are you thinking about the page turn and particularly the page turn? Yes.
Yeah. So fortunately, Sam is the sort of writer who writes page turns often. I think especially for a OGN like this, you don't need a page turn on every single right-facing or right-hand page. I think for monthly comics, that's far more of an expectation, but variety is the spice of life. And if you do that on every single spread, the reader's gonna pick up on the weird cadence in some way. But for spreads where there was a page turn, I guess my goal always is to keep the reader moving forward, right? So anything that I can do on a page turn to sort of heighten the drama if there is drama, or tell them that they should just keep going, I would try to do. And a lot of that is subconscious at this level. I don't really have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Just I was wondering how overt it was, and that you answered that very nicely. You had I didn't even look at the credits. You have a colorist on this, yes?
I was the colorist, but I employ a flatter. They're amazing. Their name is Kaiten, and they are the best flatter I have ever worked with in my entire life, and I never want to work with anybody else. And I think it just sounds more professional and fancy if we call them a color assistant. So that's how they are credited in the book. Could not have done this without them. They're amazing.
Yeah. And at what point were you doing the color? Because you talked about sort of penciling and inking in sort of 50 page batches, let's say. Did you approach the color the same way, or was that all at the end?
That was all at the end. That way I could go through and make sure that I didn't forget Micah's freckles on a page and something like that,
Right.
just make sure that everybody was on model, and that I was happy with the work, because once I moved from inks to color, changing things is nightmarish. So I never want to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I colored the book in one pass. Yeah, I don't know. It took a minute.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, and that's another question that I'm always interested in, is sort of the amount of time that you do with each step. So,
Right.
thumbnailing out the whole book took you how long?
Oh gosh, I want to say. Okay, to caveat real fast, I am a very quick artist. This is going to be unusual numbers, but I want to say I thumbnailed the book in 2.5 months.
Wow.
Does that sound right, Sam?
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Rye
fast.
is phenomenally fast.
That is
yeah,
fast.
Yeah, Rye is phenomenally
Yeah.
fast. Yeah.
200
Yeah.
pages in 90, not even 90 days,
Yeah.
75
And the
days.
whole entire book completed in what, 9 months?
Wow.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Wow. So you were essentially thumbing out roughly 3 pages a day or something.
I mean, my quota is 10, so maybe.
Wow.
Oh, but I take weekends, so
Okay. Yeah. Wow. 10 a day, really? Wow.
Oh yeah. And when I was in art school, I used to do 20, but they were much messier, and that would be a very long day. So when I started working professionally, I dropped that by 50%, and I've been very happy.
Yeah. And when you say your quota, is that any art that you're doing, or the thumbnails in particular?
Thumbnails in particular.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so at the inking stage, then, how long did that process take you?
For buzzing, I'm going to be honest, inking was very, very quick. One of the things that is sort of endemic to middle grade is that you do want the art to be a little more simple and a little bit, governed by bigger shapes rather than fine detail. Part of that is just how old the kids are, and part of that is just these are the conventions of the, I guess, genre, the subsection in American comics. So inking went unusually fast for me. I think on average I was also at 5 pages a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm actually. I mean, there's a good amount of detail here. It's not as though.
Compared to the work I do for grown-ups, it's not. It's also just physically smaller, right? This is a 6x9 book, and the American standard comic size is I want to say 10.625 by 7 something. Yeah. So I have an extra inch and a bit on all sides to play with. Yeah. For a lot of other work, I will tap out at 3 pages of inks a day.
Yeah. That's interesting. And so you're actually considering the size that it's reproducing at in terms of the I don't know that anyone's ever mentioned that to me before.
I'm sure. I wonder if other people just do it subconsciously, because I don't see how you could not do that.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's kind of cool. And then coloring, the color process.
I mean, fortunately, so my flatter, I love them so much because they will hand me non-local colors, right? So they'll pick absolutely banana pants colors, but they'll do things like have all of the characters' eye colors be this bright red. So it's very easy for me to just go in and drop my palette choices into that.
Yeah.
And I think on average I colored 7 pages a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's
how long does it take you work to do this kind of thing? Are you talking an 8-hour day, or are you pulling down
a little longer? 8 to 10, yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's you are a productive cat. I like that. No, I think that's great, because not everybody can work that fast.
Yeah, and not all styles lend themselves to that.
Sure.
I think I have one that does, and that's convenient for me.
Yeah. Well, and probably not every book either, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. No.
Lettering.
So for this one, we had the amazing Darren Bennett on lettering, and he really came through. Like I don't know, lettering is so stressful for me as an artist because it's where the comic really is a comic, and so bad lettering can absolutely ruin a book. But at the end of the day, like Darren did a great job. I believe his credit is on the inside cover. Yeah, there it is.
Oh, okay.
Who decides where the speech bubbles go? Is that an artist thing? Is that a lettering guy? Is that
So that's definitely a lettering thing. That's like, in my opinion, that's a big part of their expertise. Is they have an eye primarily on leading the reader's eye all around the page and making sure they see everything, while also respecting like the quickness of a back and forth conversation versus two characters like thinking slowly across a page at each other. I do put in where I think lettering could go in my thumbnails. And sometimes letterers do want to see that, but oftentimes they don't. And oftentimes the solutions they come up with are way better than anything I could come up with. So I'm very happy to not show anybody my attempt.
Yeah, it also depends in part whether you have an external letterer or if the artist is lettering their own work. I've certainly talked to people who have said that they've kind of penciled in letters, as they're doing the work. Whereas if it's another person doing it, you kind of have to trust them to be professional and know what they're doing.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yep. Very good. Very good. Yeah. No, you made a great comic here, and I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the process. I really am.
Thanks.
Do you guys have any last questions?
I do. I'm curious about Rye's earlier experience before art school and how you were drawn into making comics. Like, what did it look like for you in middle school? What was your high school experience? And then how did you decide? I know it's a lot, but how you got through school and your love of your art.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely one of those kids that always had a pencil and was doodling in the margins of my notes, always had sketchbooks. I was always drawing. But, there really isn't space in the school system for a lot of art education in general, I would say, and definitely not in the specifics that I was in. So I went actually to a standard four-year college, and didn't think it was possible to be a professional artist. Like I was still, drawing on the side. I was still making my little comics. And I actually graduated college and worked retail during the 2008 recession, and was miserable. And I was trying to teach myself art to get better. I didn't really know what I would do with that, but it was the only thing that brought me joy. And then at some point I realized that there's this thing called art school and that they could probably teach me the things that I was very much struggling to teach myself. So I went to SCAD for 1 year. I have a master's degree in sequential art, of all things, from SCAD. And
in a single year, really?
Yeah.
A single year?
Well, it's an MA, not an MFA, right?
Mm.
I
still thought those were 2 and 3 year programs. I mean, the one at CCA was
the MFA is a 2 or 3, yeah. But the MA is always, I mean, you could break it into 2 years if you really wanted to, but most people do it in 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what, I came out of there, I would not say my chops were quite ready to start working professionally, but I knew what I needed to do to, get to that level. And I walked out of there with a whole bunch of colleagues and peers who would, help me out and have my back and be a support system, basically. And I didn't know that I would need that, but I'm really glad I have that. Mm-hmm. I would say that having a good support system is as important as drawing all the time.
Would you say the same is relatively true, Sam?
Yeah.
From your experience at CCA?
I was actually that's how I met you. I was the part of the first inaugural class of CCA's MFA in comics program. And so, yeah, that was a 2-year program, but it's 2 summer intensives and a less intensive year round. Yeah, so that was, but yeah, my experience was just like being, it was a little bit different than Rise, in which I, you know, got into prose first, and then I was always into comics, and then I really wanted to make comics, so I went to comic school. But actually, a lot of that was, it's so interesting you talk about the recession, because that played into it for me as well. Yeah, I was like trying to figure out what to do during the recession. I really wanted to make comics and make books, and so I went to comic school to do that, and then really kind of create a community of people. That was probably yes, I learned a lot about making comics, but then at the same time, I don't think I was quite ready when I came out. I was almost ready, but then the people that I met really helped to, you know, I'm still friends with all of them today, and we all help each other. You know, I went to class with Maya Kobe, who did genderqueer, and then some other people like Trinidad Escobar, who's you know, a lot of us went to the same class. We were in the same class together, and we all kind of helped each other out. Yeah. Yep. And we still do. Yeah, we still hang out, and we still, you know, help each other out, and we're still friends. And you know,
comics are a hard gig, though. You know, and it's hard to understand what's commercial and how to make them, and how you get your feet in.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Ryan and I met at a comics camp. We went to a. That's how we met to begin with. Went on a camping trip with a bunch of other cartoonists up in Samuel P. Taylor Park. Was that what it was?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we went on a walk with one of our friends, Justin Hall. And we went on a walk with him in the hills, and then Ryan and I became friends and decided to start working on comics together. Nice. So just like, you know, so a lot of that stuff happens through things like that, and you're like, and you kind of like, you know, you build it out from there. But that's for me, that was the biggest part of it. It's like, yes, you learn a lot in art school. You learn tons in art school. You definitely do. They teach you what to do. But it really is also about like making those friendships. Yeah. Did
that answer your question sufficiently? All right, very good. Any other last things you guys would like to ask? Very good. Very good.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I think put us back on. We lost the camera for some reason. You're gonna be on camera, Rye, while we worry about this technical issue. There we go. Oh, we're on the terrible camera. Very good. Let's see.
Box camera.
That maybe makes it slightly better. Okay. Hi. Cool. Well, I think, as I say, I think this is a really good work, and I'm really glad that you guys were able to do this, and it taught me a lot, and it sounds like it's helping people who have some of the same challenges, and that's really good. I mean, that you're clicking all those boxes is really, really good. That you were able to make that work. So, yeah.
So glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. So then the final questions are much like the first question. They're almost always the same. The first one, I have two. The first one would be: is there anything coming up that you guys are doing that you would like to plug? You may or may not be, as we were talking earlier, you may not be able to plug things necessarily.
I wish I could. I have something that's going to be announced very soon that I wish I could plug, but I can't say anything about it. But it's going to be really cool, and you should all pay attention in the next week, because it's going to be a big old thing then.
Really, you can say it's a multi-book series, right?
I cannot say that yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's something that's going to be really, really cool that we should all... Well, when's this interview going to go live?
Oh, I mean, it's live now.
Oh, it's live now.
Yeah.
Well,
we're live streaming this second, and then it lasts forever.
It's going to be a cool thing, a cool big thing that I'll be able to talk about real soon.
Very good.
And then I know Rye's got some stuff too. So
what do you want to plug, Rye?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very slow-mo, off in the distance plug, but I weirdly have 2 books that will come out in April of 2024. They have nothing to do with each other. It's just that's how the publishing dice got rolled.
Yeah.
I have The Harrowing. I'm the artist, and then Kristen Kiesling is the writers, and that's out from Abrams. I want to say on the 17th of April. I really should know by now. Mid-April. And then also sometime in April, I will have Bad Dream, a dreamer coming of age story out from DC Comics. The writer is Nicole Maines. And I am already losing my mind about how I'm going to do promo for 2 books at once.
Yeah.
But I am excited. Can't wait for those to get into reader hands.
The Halloween's a great book. The Halloween is so good. I just
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it's very, very, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in general, which do you prefer working on, kids comics or comics for adults? Or do you care?
Honestly, comics for adults, I find, because I, as a reader specifically, I love ambiguity and nuance and weird, messed up stuff, to put that in a PG appropriate way of saying it. And you often don't get into that with kids stuff.
That's fair enough.
I should also, I forgot, I should also plug that I have 2 books on anime and manga coming out in October and November.
Oh,
one
nice.
for kids, The Kid's Guide to Anime and Manga from Running Press, and another one is The Essential Anime Guide. My friend Patrick and I, we both co-wrote each one, and it's all about different, if you haven't watched anime and you want to, there's 50 recommendations that we provide.
Nice.
Yeah.
And do you have a preference between adult and kid-oriented stuff?
I go back and forth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like different things about both.
Yeah.
So I like both. I really do.
That's
it's kind
good.
of like a 50-50 sort of balance
Yeah,
there.
no, that's good. I wasn't not trying to put anybody on the spot.
No. Oh no.
And then the last question is thus, that this is a series, obviously, of videos. We're up to 300 hours, something like that. A number of people watch these because they want to make comics themselves. And so also, as I'm sure you guys know, that a lot of people who want to make comics don't know how to start, or don't know what to do, or have their own bees buzzing around their heads saying you're not good enough. What would be the piece of advice that you would give to someone who wants to make comics? It can be something philosophical, it can be something emotional, it can be something very practical. I would love to hear your guys' answer as to what you think. Rye, why don't you go first?
All right. I feel like there are many, many nuggets that I could impart. But when you are starting out, like especially when even finishing a page is still a massive challenge and stressful and takes you a ridiculous amount of time, pick a story that is very, very short. Pick a 5-page story. Pick an 8-page story. Do not, when you don't even know how to articulate a hand, do not launch into your epic. Save that for when that part is no longer causing you friction. Do something small to start.
Makes a lot of sense. That I think that is sensible and brilliant. Thank you, Rye. Sam, what do you got for us?
It's always good to start with blood sacrifice. That's like the first thing.
It is never good to start with blood sacrifice. No blood sacrifice.
Start with blood sacrifice. I would say that, first of all, make sure you know why you want to get into it. Do you want to use comics as a stepping stone to something else, or do you really love comics? That's the first thing that I would say. Read a lot of them. Figure out what you like. And then, like Rye was saying, don't start with trying to do your gigantic 1,200-page opus, because you will have a really hard time doing it, and it's most likely not going to be the first thing you really put out. And then, yeah, there are a lot of nuggets, but really, I would say, get into the community. Go to comic shops. Go talk to people. Go to shows. Go to conventions.
Yeah.
See what people are doing, and try to see. And well, of course, everybody's. I assume everybody would be respectful. Ask questions.
Sure.
Be like, wow, I really love what you did. Like, can I ask what you're, did you do a pitch for this, or like how do you can ask questions? I think just like in a nice way, just be like, respectfully ask how people, got into it, and see if you can start to, form some bonds with people in the wider community. I think that will get you really far.
Yeah.
Just like really trying to care about what people are doing, because it can be a little hard to break in at first, and so it's good to, try to meet everybody at their own level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I love those answers. I love it from both of you guys. Thank you so much. So normally this is where we would switch the camera to a one on me. So now I'm gonna try and do it like that. Okay. So some housekeeping for the end of the show. God, really, this angle is no good for me.
Oh,
Look like a monster.
it's the angle.
I know. So you are sitting at home. You don't know what to read. You want something good that's intelligent, that is got a lot of heart, that is going to engage you, and that is going to teach you something about the world. Buzzing. Buy this book. It's really good. There's a thing on the screen somewhere as you're watching this that you can click and buy a copy directly from us. If you were to do so, you will probably get a signed copy, because by Sam at least, because Sam's going to sign all the copies that are left in the store today before he goes. So keep a lookout for that. The next couple of shows, just so y'all know, next month's kids show will be Ben Is it Hatke? I think it's Hatke. Who is doing Things from the Basement, this is a really great, beautiful, smart book. So that's next month's kids show. The next two shows for the adults, next Sunday, we're doing, so you can see the logo, Cartoon Show by Derek Ballard. So we'll be doing a live stream interview with him, and then roughly a month from now, it'll be Monica with Dan Clowes. So that'll be a good show. So for sure, watch these shows and subscribe and do all those things. I would like to thank people. I would like to thank Jordan for being our producer, who does stuff backstage that none of you see, but the show would not happen without that. I want to thank Ben for running the show here in the store. Thank you, my son. I want to thank my staff, without whom I could not possibly sit around and talk about comics all day. So Zoe, Kat, Katie, and Max as well. Thank you for being so awesome. That allows me to do this. I want to thank all of our readers and all the members of the club, because we wouldn't have this without you. And most of all, I want to thank all the people who make comics, which includes, turn the camera back a little bit, Sam right there and Rye right there. I want to thank you guys for making comics, because I literally would not have a comic book store if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you for spending your time with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for this book. I'm going to hold it up one last time. The book is buzzing. Buy it. And otherwise, we will see you next month, or next week, too. Both things. We will see both things. Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were watching, please subscribe and hit that bell up in the top corner. If you enjoyed the books that we're talking about and the creators that we're talking to, every month we pick a brand new book. The staff votes on it. It's a program that helps keep our store alive, and we'd love to have you as a member. You'll get a new book every month. Just follow that URL at the bottom of the screen.